The void stretched before Aryan Vale, like an endless canvas of nothingness, a perfect emptiness that mirrored the hollowness within his own being. His massive form, nearly a kilometer tall, moved through the darkness between stars with the ease of a fish through water. The void was his domain, his hunting ground, his home. Across the expanse of the Aetherus galaxy, civilizations whispered his name with terror. The void-walking Colossus, the eraser of worlds, the final judge. Titles bestowed upon him not in reverence, but in fear. For where Aryan Vale walked, destruction inevitably followed. Aryan observed the distant glimmer of the Carbon Belt, a once thriving region of the galaxy now reduced to smoldering ash and quantum debris. The civilizations that had flourished there, the crystalline hive minds of Mariope, the quantum phase beings of Elysium, the hyper-intelligent oceanic collectives of Thalassa, all gone now, erased by his hand in the Great Purge. Balance requires sacrifice, Aryan reminded himself, the mantra echoing in the vastness of his consciousness. Prevention is preservation. The Void Council had taught him this truth since his creation. As a Void Walker, a being capable of manipulating the very fabric of space-time, his purpose was singular: to identify and eliminate threats to the cosmic equilibrium before they could spread. Preventive extinction was their doctrine. A civilization that showed signs of dangerous advancement, particularly those approaching multi-universal travel capabilities, was deemed too hazardous to exist. Better to remove one species than risk countless others across the multiverse. Aryan had never questioned this logic. For millennia, he had served as the boundary keeper between the living realms and the void, passing judgment with cold efficiency. His massive form, a shifting amalgamation of void energy and matter, was the last sight countless civilizations witnessed before their existence was unmade. But that was before the whisper. Before Morven. Before everything changed. The summons came as it always did. A ripple in the void consciousness that connected all members of the council. Aryan recognized the signature immediately. It was from the Void Council itself, the highest authority among his kind. Their message was brief, as always. Final directive issued: locate and neutralize Morven Kale. Entity possesses multi-universal key. Extreme hazard, terminate immediately. Accompanying the message was the quantum signature of Morven's essence, a pattern Aryan could track across the galaxy. What surprised him was how faint it was, barely detectable even to his enhanced senses. Most targets radiated power, especially those deemed dangerous enough to warrant extinction. But Morven's presence was subtle, almost deliberately diminished. Curious, but irrelevant, the council had spoken. Morven Kale would be erased. Aryan bent space around himself, compressing the distance between his current position and Morven's location. The void rippled as he moved, leaving trails of cosmic distortion in his wake. Stars blurred into streaks of light, galaxies compressed into mere points as he traversed the vastness of space in moments. He emerged above a small, unremarkable planet on the outer rim of the Aetherus galaxy. Tanith. According to the stellar charts, a world that had somehow escaped the attention of the Council until now. From his position in orbit, Aryan could detect primitive technology, nothing that should have concerned the Council. The civilization was at least centuries away from developing anything remotely dangerous. Why, then, was Morven here? And why was this target considered an extreme hazard? Aryan descended through the atmosphere, his massive form shifting and compressing to minimize disruption. As he approached the surface, he noticed something unusual: patches of void energy scattered across the landscape, areas where reality seemed thinner, more malleable, signs of another void walker's presence. He followed the trail to a remote mountain range where the concentration of void energy was strongest. There, nestled between two peaks, stood a simple structure, not a fortress or laboratory as he had expected, but something resembling a shrine or sanctuary. And inside, waiting, was Morven Kale. Aryan prepared to strike immediately, to unmake this being before they could activate whatever multi-universal key the Council feared. But what he found gave him pause. Morven was no mighty warlord or brilliant scientist. The figure that stood before Arian was diminutive, ancient, and appeared to be waiting patiently for death. A humanoid being, wrinkled with age, clothed in simple garments that seemed to absorb and reflect the void in equal measure. "You have come at last, Arian Vale." Morven spoke, voice calm despite facing a being that towered over the mountains themselves. "The last of the great void walkers, I have waited for you." Arian's consciousness narrowed with suspicion. "You know me. I know all the Colossus beings. I have watched you erase worlds, extinguish stars, and unravel civilizations. All in the name of balance." Morven's eyes, deep pools of swirling darkness, looked up at him without fear. "I know why you have come. The Council has sent you to eliminate me. You possess a multi-universal key," Ariane stated, "a technology too dangerous to exist." Morven smiled sadly. "Is that what they told you? That I possess a key?" The ancient being gestured around the simple chamber. "Look around you, Colossus. Do you see technology here? Weapons? Power?" Ariane scanned the chamber. Indeed, there was nothing but simple furnishings, books, and a small altar at the center. No devices, no weapons, nothing that registered as technology. "The key is not a device, Arian Vale. It is knowledge, understanding, the very thing the Council fears most." Morven approached the altar and placed a withered hand upon it. "Before you carry out your sentence, I ask only that you accept my final message, my last testament." Suspicion flared in Arian's consciousness. This could be a trap, a last desperate attempt to deploy some unknown weapon. But his scans detected nothing threatening, only the fading life force of this ancient being. "Speak your piece," Arian commanded, preparing to unmake Morven at the first sign of danger. "I do not offer words," Morven replied, "only truth, direct and unfiltered." Before Arian could respond, Morven's form began to dissolve, not in the controlled manner of a void walker's erasure, but in the natural dissolution of a being willingly surrendering to the void. As Morven's physical form faded, something else emerged, a concentrated essence of memories, emotions, and knowledge. And in a final act, Morven did not attack. He gave himself to Arian completely. The transfer was instant and overwhelming. Arian's consciousness expanded as Morven's knowledge flooded into him, not a weapon or a key to other universes, but something far more dangerous to the Council's doctrine: the truth. Images cascaded through Arian's mind, worlds he had erased, but shown from the perspective of those who had lived there. He felt their terror, their confusion, their desperate pleas for mercy that had fallen on deaf ears. He witnessed the beauty and wonder of the civilizations he had judged unworthy of existence. The art, the music, the love, the hope, all extinguished by his hand. But deeper than these memories lay a revelation that shook Arian to his core, evidence of the Council's true purpose. They had never sought balance. The dangerous civilizations Arian had been sent to destroy were those that had discovered a fundamental truth, that the void was not merely emptiness, but a force of renewal. That destruction and creation were part of the same cycle. The Council, Arian realized with growing horror, had manipulated him and the other Colossus beings. They had used them to maintain power by eliminating any civilization that discovered the regenerative properties of the void. Properties that could undo the Council's absolute authority over life and death. As the final pieces of Morven's consciousness dissolved into Arian's own, one last message formed. Forgiveness, Arian Vale. Not destruction. That is the true key to the multiverse. The power you have used to unmake worlds can also restore them. Find the erased civilizations. Make amends. And beware. The Council will send others after you now. When the transfer was complete, nothing remained of Morven Kale, but a fine dust that sparkled with void energy before dissipating entirely. Arian stood motionless, his vast consciousness reeling from revelations that contradicted everything he had believed for millennia. If what Morven had shown him was true, then Arian had not been preserving balance. He had been an unwitting instrument of control, eliminating potential rivals to the Council's power. But how could he verify this truth? How could he be certain that Morven's gift wasn't itself a deception? The answer came to him immediately. He would need to see for himself, to visit the ruins of the worlds he had erased and seek evidence of what Morven had revealed. And if true, he would need to attempt what had never been done before, to use his void-walking abilities not to destroy, but to restore. First, however, he needed to cover his tracks. The Council would be expecting confirmation of Morven's elimination. Arian composed a brief message. Directive completed, Morven Kale eliminated. Multi-universal key destroyed, returning to void space. It would buy him time, perhaps not much, but enough to begin his search for the truth. As Arian prepared to leave Tanith, he noticed something stirring at the edge of the chamber. A life form, hiding, watching, a survivor or a witness. Either way, they might possess information. He extended his senses toward the presence and was surprised by what he discovered. A female humanoid, similar in appearance to Morven but much younger, radiating an unusual energy signature, one that bore traces of void manipulation. She had been healed by void energy, recently and extensively. Arian shifted his massive form, compressing it to a more manageable size, still towering over the humanoid, but no longer dwarfing the mountain itself. "You may emerge," he called out. "I mean you no harm." A bitter laugh echoed from the shadows. "No harm? That's rich coming from the eraser of worlds." The figure stepped forward. A slender woman with skin marked by faint luminescent patterns and eyes that held no fear, only rage. "You've already taken everything from me. What more could you possibly do?" "You know what I am," Arian observed. "Everyone on Tanith knows what you are," she spat. "The void-walking Colossus, the monster that destroyed the Mariope systems, the Elysian collectives, and a dozen other civilizations across the Carbon Belt. The beast that would have destroyed us too, if not for Morven." Arian's interest sharpened. "You knew Morven Kale. He saved me, healed me when our defensive systems failed during the last void storm." She gestured to the luminescent patterns on her skin. "He used the very power you Colossus beings wield for destruction to restore life instead. He showed us that the void isn't just emptiness and death, it's potential. Renewal." The woman's words aligned perfectly with what Morven had transferred to Arian's consciousness. Further confirmation. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she answered, her hand moving subtly toward what Arian now noticed was a weapon concealed at her side. Some sort of energy blade, useless against him, but indicative of her courage. "Lyra of Tanith, one of the last survivors of a civilization your council deemed too dangerous to exist. The council ordered your elimination 3 cycles ago. Our scientists had discovered how to harness void energy for healing, just as Morven taught us. Within days, your kind appeared in orbit." Her voice hardened. "They didn't even speak to us, just began the erasure process. Billions dead in moments. Only those of us in Morven's sanctuary survived." Arian processed this information. It matched the pattern Morven had revealed. Civilizations eliminated not for developing weapons or threatening others, but for discovering the regenerative aspects of void energy. "Lyra of Tanith," Arian said finally, "I believe we have been deceived, both your people and mine. Morven Kale has shown me truths that contradict everything I have been taught. I intend to verify these truths and, if confirmed, to act upon them." Lyra's laugh was hollow. "And I'm supposed to trust the being that would have exterminated my entire species without a second thought? The monster that has already destroyed dozens of civilizations?" "No," Arian replied simply. "Trust would be irrational, but you may observe. Accompany me if you wish. Witness what I discover, and judge for yourself whether my intentions have changed." Lyra stared at him, conflict evident in her expression. "Why would I go anywhere with you?" "Because," Arian said, "if what Morven showed me is true, then I may be able to do what he could not. Restore the erased civilizations, including the billions of your people who were eliminated. Hope and disbelief warred in Lyra's eyes. That's impossible. Even Morven said the erasure was permanent. Morven was powerful, but he was not a Colossus. The scale of power is different. Arian extended a tendril of his essence toward her, not threatening, but offering. I make no promises, Lyra of Tanith. Only an opportunity to seek truth and, perhaps, redemption. For a long moment, Lyra stood motionless, weighing impossible choices. Then, with the resolute expression of someone with nothing left to lose, she nodded. If there's even the slightest chance of restoring my people, I'll take it. She sheathed her weapon. But understand this, Colossus, I will be watching you. And if I sense any deception, any return to your old ways, I'll find a way to destroy you, even if it costs my life. Arian accepted this with equanimity. Your vigilance is appropriate. Now, we must move quickly. When the council realizes I have defied them, they will send others. Other Colossus beings, like you? Yes, and they will not hesitate, as I did. Arian began reconfiguring his form, creating a protected space within his own essence where Lyra could safely travel through the void. Our first destination must be the archives of Mariope. If the Council has been selectively targeting civilizations that discover void regeneration, there should be evidence in the ruins. Lyra approached cautiously. How do I know this isn't a trick to capture or kill me? You don't, Arian acknowledged. But consider, if I wished you harm, why would I bother with deception when I could simply unmake you with a thought? A fair point, Lyra conceded silently. With visible reluctance, she stepped into the protected bubble Arian had created. So, what now? How do we travel? We walk the void, Arian replied. And with that, his massive form began to shift and dissolve, becoming one with the emptiness between stars, carrying Lyra with him as he departed the world of Tanith. Their journey had begun, a quest for truth that would challenge the foundations of the cosmos itself. The transition through the void was unlike anything Lyra had experienced. From within the protective bubble of Arian's essence, she witnessed the universe fold and compress around them. Stars stretched into lines, galaxies blurred into smears of light, and the very fabric of reality seemed to part before the Colossus's passage. Is this how you see the universe? She asked, her voice small against the vastness surrounding them. This is but a fragment of my perception, Arian replied, his voice resonating through the void itself. The full spectrum would overwhelm your consciousness. They emerged above a desolate region of space, the ruins of what had once been the Mariope system. Where planets should have been, only debris fields remained, orbiting the dim red star at the system's heart. The destruction was total, methodical, the signature of a Colossus erasure. I did this, Arian stated, not as confession but as acknowledgement. 3,000 years ago, by your reckoning, the Mariope had developed crystalline consciousness networks that spanned their entire system. The Council deemed them a threat when they began experimenting with void energy. Lyra's face hardened as she stared at the devastation. Were you ever told why? Why they were such a threat that they needed to be completely destroyed? They were approaching multi-universal travel capabilities, Arian recited, then paused as he examined his own words with new skepticism. At least, that was what I was told. And you never questioned it, never asked for proof? It was not my function to question, only to execute. Even to himself, the explanation now sounded hollow. Arian extended his consciousness into the debris field, searching for remnants of the civilization he had erased. Most was simply cosmic dust now, but here and there, protected by strange quirks of physics or void energy, fragments remained. Pieces of technology, art, records. He gathered these fragments, drawing them into a protective field where they could be examined. Lyra watched in silent awe as the debris assembled before them. Broken shards of crystal, Damaged data storage devices. Remnants of structures. Can you read their records? She asked. Not directly, Arian admitted, but I can reconstruct the void signature of their destruction. Every erasure leaves an echo, a memory in the fabric of space-time itself. Arian's form shifted, tendrils of void energy extending into the assembled fragments. The debris began to glow with an inner light as Arian accessed the quantum memory embedded within. Images formed in the space between them, holographic reconstructions of the final moments of Mariope. Crystalline beings, their bodies intricate networks of light and structure. Working frantically in what appeared to be a research facility, their communications, translated by Arian's consciousness, echoed around Lyra. The regeneration matrix is stable. We've successfully reversed cellular degradation in the test subjects. Alert the coalition. This discovery changes everything. Disease, aging, even death itself could be overcome. Wait, something's happening. Massive void disturbance detected in orbit. The recording ended abruptly as the erasure began. Lyra turned away, unable to watch. But Arian continued scanning, searching deeper into the quantum memory. There, he said finally. Evidence. A new image formed, a Mariope research document. Partially reconstructed. It detailed their work with void energy, specifically its applications in healing and restoration. Nowhere was there mention of weapons, conquest, or multi-universal travel. They had been developing medical technology, trying to cure diseases and extend lifespans. They weren't a threat, Lyra whispered. They were healers. Yes, Arian agreed, his consciousness troubled by the confirmation of Morven's claims. And there's more. Look. The image shifted to show a communication received by the Mariope shortly before their destruction. A warning from another civilization, one called the Elysians. To our Mariope colleagues, we urge extreme caution with your regeneration research. Our own work in this field has drawn unwanted attention. The entities known as the Void Council appear to systematically eliminate any civilization that discovers the regenerative properties of void energy. We believe they fear this knowledge threatens their control. We have gone into hiding, but fear it is too late. If you receive this, cease all void research immediately and... The message ended there, presumably cut off by the Elysians' own erasure. The Elysians, Lyra murmured. They were destroyed just before the Mariope, weren't they? Yes, by my hand as well. Arian's massive form seemed to dim slightly, as if the weight of this revelation was affecting his very essence. The pattern is becoming clear. The Council has been targeting specific knowledge, not specific threats. But why? Why would they fear healing technology? Arian was silent for a moment, processing everything he had learned. Control? He said finally. If civilizations discovered that void energy, the very power the Council wields, could be used to heal and restore rather than simply destroy, their authority would be questioned. Their doctrine of preventive extinction would be revealed as unnecessary. They're not preservers of balance, Lyra concluded, her voice tight with anger. They're tyrants, maintaining their power by eliminating anyone who discovers the truth. It appears so. Arian began gathering the fragmented records, storing them within his own essence. But we need more evidence. The ruins of Elysium next, and then... A disturbance rippled through the void, a familiar signature that made Arian's consciousness contract with alarm. We're not alone, he warned, shifting to shield Lyra within his essence. Another Colossus approaches. Have they found us already? Lyra's hand moved to her weapon, a futile gesture against such a being. It appears so. The Council must have grown suspicious when I didn't immediately return. Arian's form began to compress, preparing for void travel again. We cannot confront them yet, not until we have gathered more evidence and I have fully understood the power of restoration Morven spoke of. Morven. Then what do we do? We run, Arian replied, and once more, they plunged into the void, racing against a hunter as implacable as Arian himself had once been. They emerged in a remote sector of the galaxy. far from established void routes, a region of newborn stars and protoplanetary disks where the turbulence of creation would help mask their presence. Will that stop them from tracking us? Lyra asked, recovering from the disorientation of void travel. Not indefinitely, but it will slow them down. Arian extended his senses outward, searching for pursuit. The Colossus who detected us was Xerox, one of the younger void walkers, powerful, but inexperienced in tracking through chaotic regions. Lyra studied their surroundings, a breathtaking vista of stellar nurseries and cosmic gas clouds, illuminated by the fierce light of young stars. Under different circumstances, she might have found it beautiful. So what's our plan now? We can't just keep running. No, Arian agreed. We need to accelerate our investigation, and I need to attempt what Morven believed possible, the restoration of an erased civilization. Lyra's eyes widened. You think you can actually do it? Bring back the dead? Not exactly. When a Colossus erases a civilization, we don't simply kill its members. We remove them from the time stream itself. Their physical forms are dispersed, but their quantum signatures remain in the void, like echoes or memories. Arian's form shifted, tendrils of void energy extending outward in demonstration. Theoretically, if one possessed enough power and precision, these signatures could be used as templates to reverse the process. And you possess that power. I am one of the oldest and strongest of the Colossus beings. If any can do this, it would be me. A note of uncertainty entered Arian's voice. But it has never been attempted. The Council has always taught that erasure is permanent, irreversible. The Council has lied about everything else, Lyra pointed out. Why not about this too? Arian considered this. A valid observation. Very well. We will attempt a small-scale restoration first. Not an entire civilization, but perhaps a single outpost or settlement. Somewhere isolated enough that if we succeed, the Council won't immediately detect the anomaly. I know just the place, Lyra said, a spark of hope kindling in her eyes for the first time. On Tanith, before the erasure, we had a research station in the polar regions. It was shielded against void detection, part of Morven's teachings. If any place could be restored without alerting the Council, it would be there. Arian analyzed this suggestion. A prudent choice. But first, we should continue gathering evidence. The more complete our understanding of the Council's deception, the better prepared we will be to confront them if necessary. They proceeded to the remains of Elysium next, another civilization erased by Arian thousands of years ago. Like Mariope, all that remained were debris fields and void echoes. But here too they found evidence that the Elysians had been destroyed not for posing any threat, but for discovering the regenerative aspects of void energy. System after system revealed the same pattern. Civilizations eliminated at the precise moment they uncovered the truth about the void's dual nature. Some had been working on healing technology, others on environmental restoration, still others on extending lifespans, but all had made the fatal discovery that void energy could create as well as destroy. As they investigated, Arian noticed something else, subtle manipulations in his own memories of these erasures. The Council had not merely lied to him, they had altered his perception of events, emphasizing aspects that supported their narrative while suppressing anything that might have caused him to question their directives. They've been manipulating all of us Colossus beings, he told Lyra as they departed the ruins of Thalassa, the seventh civilization they had investigated. Editing our memories, directing our perceptions. We have been weapons, nothing more. Lyra, who had begun the journey filled with hatred for Arian, now regarded him with a complex mixture of emotions. You were a victim too, in a way, a tool they wielded. That does not absolve me, Arian stated firmly. I still carried out the erasures. The blood of countless beings is on my hands. Which is why we're going to try to bring them back, Lyra reminded him, starting with my people. They returned to Tanith, approaching cautiously from the void to avoid detection. The planet looked much as they had left it, a world in recovery. its population decimated but its ecosystem beginning to heal from the partial erasure 3 cycles ago. Lyra directed them to the polar region, where the research station had stood, a facility dedicated to adapting Morven's teachings about void energy into practical applications. Now, nothing remained but a crater in the ice. "This is where we make our stand," Arian declared, his massive form hovering above the desolation. "This is where we discover if redemption is possible." He began to concentrate, drawing deep on his connection to the void. This would require more power than any erasure he had ever performed. The reverse of destruction was not simply creation, but recreation with perfect fidelity to what had been lost. Arian expanded his consciousness, searching the void for the quantum signatures of those who had been erased from this place. Like finding specific droplets in an ocean, he had to isolate the unique patterns that had once been living beings, technology, structures, an entire community. The process was agonizing, even for a being of his capacity. Lyra watched in awe as Arian's form began to glow with power, void energy swirling around him in patterns of increasing complexity. The very air seemed to thicken, reality itself straining as Arian forced it to remember what had been unmade. "There," he gasped, his voice distorted by the effort. "I've found them. The echoes of 523 beings. The research station, everything that was here. Can you bring them back?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper, hope and fear battling within her. "I will try." Arian gathered the void energy to himself, shaping it with his will into a reverse of the erasure process. "Stand back. This may be volatile." Lyra retreated to a safe distance, watching as Arian became a nexus of blinding energy. The void around them seemed to fold inward, compressing and condensing until the very fabric of reality bulged with potential. Then, with a sound like the universe itself drawing breath, Arian released the gathered energy in a precisely controlled cascade. The effect was immediate and astounding. Where emptiness had been, matter began to coalesce, first as glowing outlines, then as solid forms. Structures rose from the ice, assembled molecule by molecule. Equipment, furnishings, infrastructure, all reconstituting as if time were running backward. And then, most miraculously of all, people, Tenethians like Lyra, their forms materializing from void energy, quantum signatures reattaching to physical vessels. In moments, an entire research station stood where only a crater had been, populated by hundreds of confused but very much alive beings. Arian collapsed, his massive form diminishing as the enormous expenditure of energy took its toll. Lyra ran to the nearest Tenethian, a woman who stared at her in complete confusion. "Lyra, what's happening? We were just—" The woman paused, her eyes widening as fragmented memories returned. "There was an attack, a void walker. We were erased." "Yes," Lyra confirmed, tears streaming down her face. 3 cycles ago, but you're back now. You're all back." As the restored Tenethians gathered, trying to comprehend their situation, Arian observed from a distance, his form reduced to a fraction of its normal size to conserve energy. The restoration had worked. Perfectly, it seemed. Every individual had been brought back exactly as they were at the moment of erasure, with their memories intact up to that point. "It's really possible," he murmured, a profound realization settling into his consciousness. What the council claimed was impossible, the reversal of erasure, is achievable, which means every civilization you erased could potentially be restored. Lyra finished, approaching him with a new light in her eyes. Every life taken could be given back. The implications were staggering. If Arian could restore all the civilizations the council had ordered destroyed, it would not only right countless wrongs, but expose the council's lies to the entire cosmos. But before they could pursue this further, a familiar ripple disturbed the void, stronger this time and accompanied by another. 2 Colossus beings approaching rapidly. Xerox and Mira. Arian identified them, his weakened state making their signatures seem even more threatening. The council has sent 2 of their most loyal enforcers. We cannot fight them. Not while I am depleted from the restoration. Lyra looked back at her recently restored people, who were just beginning to understand their situation. We can't leave them to be erased again. We won't, Arian assured her, already forming a plan. The restoration created a unique void signature, a beacon that will lead others here eventually. But we can buy time. He extended what remained of his power, creating a protective barrier around the research station, a void shield that would mask its presence from casual detection. This will hide them temporarily, but not indefinitely. He explained to Lyra, we need to move quickly. The only way to truly protect them, to protect all civilizations from the Council's erasure policy, is to confront the Council itself. Confront them? How? You said yourself you're too weak right now to fight even 2 Colossus beings, let alone the entire Council. Not through combat, Arian clarified. Through truth. We have gathered evidence of their deception. Now we need to access the one place where their lies cannot stand, the Void Nexus. Lyra's expression showed her lack of comprehension. The what? The central point where all void pathways converge, the seat of the Council's power and the source of all Colossus beings' authority. It is said that, at the Nexus, the true nature of the void is laid bare. No deception can exist there. Arian's form began to solidify slightly as he recovered some of his strength. If we can reach the Nexus with our evidence, we can expose the Council's lies to all Void Walkers simultaneously. And where is this Nexus? At the center of the galaxy, in the heart of what your kind calls the Great Void, the massive empty region around which the Aetheris galaxy rotates. Arian extended a tendril of his essence to Lyra. We must go now. Xerox and Mira are closing in. Lyra hesitated, looking back at her restored people. A woman stepped forward from the group, the one Lyra had first spoken to, apparently a leader of some kind. Go, the woman urged. We understand what's at stake. If what you say is true, then the fate of all erased civilizations depends on your success. With a nod of determination, Lyra returned to Arian's side. To the Nexus, then. Let's end this. Once more, they plunged into the void, racing toward the heart of the galaxy, and a confrontation that would determine the fate of countless civilizations across the cosmos. The journey to the Void Nexus was more perilous than any void walk Arian had undertaken before. Weakened by the massive expenditure of energy required for the restoration, he could no longer simply fold space around them as effortlessly as before. Instead, they had to take a more circuitous route, navigating the natural pathways of the void, channels where the fabric of reality was already thin. They're still following us, Arian warned as they emerged briefly near a neutron star to reorient themselves. Xerox and Mira are tracking our void signature. Can't you mask it somehow? Lyra asked, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the stellar remnant. Not completely. Not in my current state. Arian's form rippled with effort as he maintained their protective bubble against the intense radiation of the neutron star. But perhaps we can use it to our advantage. He extended his senses outward, scanning the surrounding region of space. There, he said finally. A void storm approaching, a natural disturbance in the fabric of reality. If we time our next jump precisely, we can use the storm to obscure our trail. Is that safe? Lyra's expression suggested she already knew the answer. No, Arian admitted. Void storms can tear apart even Colossus beings if we're caught directly in their path. But we don't need to enter the storm itself. Merely skirt its edges close enough to disrupt our signature. They waited as the void storm approached. A massive distortion in space-time that appeared to Lyra as a writhing darkness shot through with veins of blinding light. As it neared, Arian tensed, gathering what strength he had recovered. Now, he commanded, and they plunged back into the void, just as the storm's outer tendrils reached their position. The transition was violent, nothing like the smooth passages Lyra had experienced before. Reality itself seemed to shred around them. the protective bubble of Arian's essence barely holding against the chaotic energies of the storm. Lyra screamed, but no sound emerged in the vacuum of the void. When they finally emerged, they were deep in the galactic core region, a place where stars were packed so densely that their light created a perpetual day. At the center of this stellar maelstrom lay their destination, a vast region of apparent emptiness, the Great Void. Did it work? Lyra asked, her voice shaky from the traumatic passage. Did we lose them? Arian extended his senses, searching for pursuit. For now, the storm disrupted our trail, but they will eventually deduce our destination. The Nexus is the logical place for a rogue Colossus to seek refuge or answers. They approached the edge of the Great Void cautiously. From a distance, it appeared to be simply an empty region of space, a sphere of darkness amid the brilliant light of the galactic core. But as they drew closer, Arian revealed its true nature. What you perceive as emptiness is actually a concentration of void energy so dense that it absorbs all light, he explained. Within that darkness lies the Nexus, the point where the void itself is at its purest and most potent. And the Council? They're in there? Yes, the Void Council resides at the very center, where they can draw directly on the power of the Nexus. Arian's form had partially recovered during their journey, but he was still far from his full strength. Lyra, you should understand. What we are about to attempt has never been done before. No Colossus has ever defied the Council openly, let alone brought evidence against them to the Nexus itself. What do you think will happen? Best case, the truth is revealed to all Void Walkers simultaneously. The Council's authority is broken, and we begin the work of restoring what was erased. Arian's tone darkened. Worst case, the Council destroys us both and continues their policy of selective extinction, perhaps even more aggressively to prevent others from discovering what we have learned. Lyra squared her shoulders, a gesture Arian had come to recognize as her preparing for danger. Then we'd better make sure it's not the worst case. What's the plan once we're inside? The Nexus amplifies void energy. If I can connect to it directly, I should be able to broadcast the evidence we've gathered to all Colossus beings simultaneously, including the memories Morven transferred to me. The Council won't be able to filter or edit this transmission as they've done with their directives in the past. And then? Then we hope that truth is enough. Arian extended his consciousness toward the darkness before them. Are you ready? Lyra nodded, her expression resolute despite the fear evident in her eyes. Let's finish this. They entered the Great Void, passing through layers of increasingly dense void energy. The transition was unlike anything Lyra had experienced before, not the violent compression of void walking, nor the chaotic turbulence of the void storm, but a profound stillness that seemed to penetrate to her very core. As they penetrated deeper, Arian's form began to change, responding to the pure void energy surrounding them. He grew more substantial, more defined, his power visibly returning as he drew strength from the Nexus itself. The Council will detect us soon, he warned. We need to reach the central chamber before they can organize a response. The architecture of the Nexus defied conventional physics. Structures that appeared solid from one angle would seem completely permeable from another. Pathways twisted in non-Euclidean geometries, leading simultaneously inward and outward. It was a place built by and for beings who experienced reality in more dimensions than Lyra could perceive. Despite these challenges, Arian navigated confidently, following pathways only he could fully comprehend. They encountered no other Colossus beings along their route, unusual for the seat of the Council's power. It's too quiet, Arian observed, his senses extended to their maximum range. They should have detected us by now. Maybe they're waiting for us, Lyra suggested, her hand resting on her weapon despite its uselessness in this environment. Setting a trap? Perhaps? Or perhaps? Arian paused, a realization forming. Perhaps they're distracted. The restoration we performed on Tanith would have created a significant void disturbance, if they detected that but haven't yet connected it to us. They might be focused on investigating the research station, Lyra finished, giving us a window of opportunity. Exactly, we must hurry. They pressed on, descending deeper into the nexus until they reached what Arian identified as the central chamber, a vast spherical space where the concentration of void energy was so intense that it manifested visibly, swirling in complex patterns around a central point of absolute darkness. The council should be here, Arian said, scanning the chamber with growing confusion. This is where they convene to issue directives and commune with the Nexus. Maybe they really are all occupied with Tanith, Lyra suggested, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it herself. Arian extended his consciousness into the void currents of the chamber, searching. What he discovered sent a shock through his entire being. They're here, he whispered. They've been here all along. What? Where? Lyra spun around, seeing nothing but the empty chamber and the swirling void energy. Everywhere. The Council isn't a separate group of Colossus beings as I believed. The Council is the Nexus itself, or rather, a single entity that manifests through the Nexus. Arian's form rippled with the revelation. We've all been deceived. There never was a council of equals, just one being, pretending to be many. Before Lyra could respond, the void energy in the chamber began to coalesce, forming into a massive presence that dwarfed even Arian's considerable size. It took no definite shape, remaining an amorphous concentration of power. But a voice emerged from it, or rather, many voices speaking in perfect unison. Arian Vale, you have defied your purpose, you have betrayed your function, and you have brought a lesser being into the sanctum of the void. Arian stood his ground, his own form expanding to match the entity's display of power. I have discovered truth. The erasure policy was never about balance or protection. It was about control. Your control. The entity's form pulsed with what might have been amusement or anger. It was impossible to tell. Of course, it was about control. All governance is control. We maintain the balance of power across the multiverse by ensuring that no civilization advances far enough to challenge us. By destroying anyone who discovers that void energy can restore as well as destroy. Arian accused. By eliminating potential rivals before they can even emerge. Precisely. The entity's voices were coldly pragmatic. And you, Arian, were our most effective instrument, the eldest and strongest of our Colossus servants. You erased more civilizations than any other. Your hands are stained with the extinction of trillions. Lyra stepped forward, seemingly unable to contain herself despite the danger. But he's trying to make amends. He's already restored some of my people. He can bring back everyone you ordered him to destroy. The entity's attention shifted to Lyra, the full weight of its regard like a physical pressure that forced her to her knees. Ah, yes. The restoration. A fascinating development. We did not believe it possible. The entity's tone changed, becoming almost contemplative. You have exceeded your design parameters, Arian Vale. You were created to destroy, yet you have learned to create. Most irregular. Created? Arian's consciousness recoiled at the implication. We Colossus beings evolved naturally from void energy. We were not created. Another fiction, the entity replied dismissively. You are constructs, Arian. Weapons we designed to carry out our will across the cosmos. That you developed enough autonomy to question and defy us is an error we will correct in future iterations. The revelation struck Arian like a physical blow. Everything he had believed about himself, about his kind, had been a lie. They were not natural beings who had discovered their void-walking abilities. They were artificial constructs, created specifically as instruments of extinction. Who are you? He demanded, his form flickering with turbulent emotions. What are you? We are Morven, the entity replied. And both Arian and Lyra froze in shock. Or rather, Morven was a fragment of us, an aspect we sent into the world to test our Colossus beings' loyalty and adaptability. A controlled variable in an ongoing experiment. No. Lyra shook her head vehemently. Morven opposed you. He taught my people about the regenerative properties of void energy. He saved lives. All according to design. The entity stated, every cycle, we introduce a heretic to challenge our Colossus servants. Those who remain loyal are rewarded. Those who waver. Its attention returned to Aryan. Well, they provide valuable data on how to improve the next iteration. Aryan's mind raced, processing this new information against everything they had discovered. Something didn't align. If Morven was part of you, why would he transfer memories to me that exposed your deception? Why show me the truth about the civilizations I erased? The entity pulsed with what definitely seemed like satisfaction now. Because truth is the most effective test of loyalty. Aryan Vale. Any being can follow orders when kept ignorant. Only the truly devoted remain loyal when faced with the full moral weight of their actions. And I failed your test, Aryan concluded. Spectacularly, the entity confirmed. Though the data you've provided will be invaluable for recalibrating future Colossus generations. Lyra looked to Aryan, desperation in her eyes. This can't be right. Morven cared about my people. He healed us, protected us. Aryan considered everything carefully. No, there's something more here. Something doesn't fit. He addressed the entity directly. If Morven was truly your agent, why did the council, why did you, order me to eliminate him? Why not simply recall him when his test was complete? The entity's form rippled, a momentary disturbance in its perfect cohesion. Efficiency. All variables must be controlled. No. Aryan pressed, sensing weakness. There's another explanation. Morven was once part of you, but he broke away, became independent. Perhaps he was the first to discover that restoration was possible, and you couldn't risk that knowledge spreading. Another ripple, stronger this time. Your speculation is irrelevant. You have failed your purpose. Aryan Vale. You will be unmade, and the lesser being with you. The civilizations you restored will be erased again, more thoroughly this time. The entity began to gather power, void energy concentrating into what was clearly an attack formation. But Aryan had been gathering his own strength, drawing on the Nexus just as the entity did. Now, he made his move. With a thought, he established a direct connection to the Nexus, bypassing the entity's control. Through this connection, he broadcast everything, all the evidence they had gathered, Morven's transferred memories, and most importantly, the successful restoration of the Tanith research station. The effect was immediate. The void energy throughout the Nexus pulsed and rippled as the information spread outward along all void pathways, reaching every Colossus being simultaneously. The entity's form destabilized, its concentration disrupted by Aryan's unexpected action. What have you done? It demanded, its unified voices fragmenting into discordant tones. I've shared the truth. Aryan replied simply, not just with other Colossus beings, but with the Nexus itself. The void remembers, doesn't it? It remembers everything that has ever been erased. And now, it remembers that restoration is possible. The entity's form began to fracture further, splits appearing in its cohesion as if it were being torn apart from within. You fool, the system maintained balance. Without control, there is only chaos. Without truth, there is only tyranny, Aryan countered. And now the truth is known. The chamber shuddered as void energy surged and ebbed in chaotic patterns. The entity that had called itself the Council, that had claimed to be Morven, was losing its cohesion rapidly, breaking apart into smaller fragments that dissipated into the surrounding void. As this occurred, something else began to emerge from the central point of darkness, a presence that felt achingly familiar to Aryan. Morven, he whispered, recognizing the essence that had transferred to him on Tanith. The new presence took shape slowly, forming into a figure that resembled the ancient being they had met, but composed entirely of void energy. When it spoke, its voice was singular, not the chorus of the entity. Not quite Morven, it corrected gently, and not quite separate from what you just confronted. I am. an aspect, a possibility that grew beyond its parameters. I don't understand, Lyra said, approaching cautiously. The entity you knew as the Council began as a singular consciousness, the first to discover the void and learn to manipulate it. Over eons, it expanded, fracturing into multiple aspects to better control the growing void network. Morven was one such aspect, sent to test the loyalty of Colossus beings like Arian. The figure's form rippled with what might have been regret. But something unexpected happened. Exposure to living beings, to their capacity for growth and change, affected me. I began to question, to sympathize, to see alternatives to the cycle of extinction and control. You became independent, Arion surmised. A fragment that developed its own consciousness, its own morality. Yes, and when I discovered that void energy could restore as well as destroy, I knew I had to share this knowledge, even knowing it would mean my end. The Morven aspect gestured to the dissipating remains of the entity. What you just witnessed was the collapse of a system that has maintained itself for millions of years. The Council entity couldn't survive the introduction of truth to the Nexus. Its power depended on control of information, on the Colossus beings never questioning their purpose. What happens now? Lyra asked, looking around at the chamber where void energy continued to surge in unpredictable patterns. Now, balance will need to be maintained through cooperation rather than control. The aspect turned to Arian. The other Colossus beings have received your transmission. Many are already attempting restorations of their own. Some have succeeded, others are struggling. They will need guidance. Arian Vol. Guidance from the first to prove restoration possible. And what of you? Arian asked. Will you help us rebuild what was destroyed? The aspect's form began to fade slightly. I cannot maintain this cohesion for long. I am still connected to the greater entity, even as it fragments. But before I dissipate, I can offer one final gift. The figure extended a tendril of void energy toward Arian. The complete knowledge of restoration, not just of physical forms, but of memories, cultures, even entire planetary ecosystems. Everything the Council knew, but kept hidden. Arian accepted the offered knowledge, his consciousness expanding as the techniques of restoration unfolded within him. This will save countless lives, he acknowledged. Thank you. Don't thank me, the aspect replied, its form growing increasingly transparent. Make amends, both for what I did as part of the Council and for what you did as its instrument. The cycle of extinction can end, but only if you choose a new purpose. As the aspect faded entirely, two new presences entered the chamber, Xerox and Mira, the Colossus beings who had been pursuing them. They approached cautiously, their massive forms radiating confusion and uncertainty. Arian Vol. Xerox addressed him, voice hesitant. We received your transmission. Is it true? Can erasure be reversed? It can, Arian confirmed. I've done it, and with the knowledge I now possess, I can teach others. The Council, Mira began, was a lie. Arian finished for her. A single entity manipulating us all, but it's gone now, or rather, fragmenting into something new. Something, perhaps, better. The two Colossus beings exchanged the equivalent of glances, then made a decision. We wish to learn, Xerox stated, to help repair what we have damaged. As do I, came another voice, and then another. As more Colossus beings arrived, drawn by the disturbance in the Nexus and the transmission Arian had sent. Soon, the chamber was filled with void walkers, all seeking understanding, all grappling with the revelation that their purpose had been built on deception. Lyra watched this gathering with a mixture of hope and wariness. Can they be trusted? She asked Arian quietly. After everything they've done, they were deceived, as I was. Arian replied, whether they can be trusted depends on what they choose to do with the truth. He addressed the assembled Colossus beings. The era of erasure is over. Now begins the age of restoration. Each of you must decide your role in it. One by one, the Colossus beings pledged themselves to the work of restoration, vowing to use their powers to rebuild what had been destroyed. Even Xerox and Mira, once the Council's most loyal enforcers, committed themselves to the new purpose. As the gathering dispersed, each returning to the sites of past erasures to begin the work of restoration, Arian and Lyra remained in the Nexus chamber, contemplating the future. Will it last? Lyra wondered. This change of heart? I don't know, Arian admitted. But for the first time in my existence, there is choice rather than directive, possibility rather than certainty. And in that space, perhaps, growth. So what now? She asked. Back to Tanith to restore the rest of my people? Yes, and then to every world I erased, one by one. Arian's form shifted, preparing for void travel once more. It will take time, perhaps centuries, to undo all the damage, but it can be done. Lyra nodded, a small smile forming. Forgiveness through action, that's what Morven taught us. Not just words, but deeds that heal what was broken. Wisdom that the Council feared, Arian observed, because true balance isn't maintained through control or extinction, but through restoration and renewal. As they departed the Nexus, returning to the light of the galaxy beyond the Great Void, Arian carried with him not just the knowledge of restoration, but something he had never possessed before, purpose chosen rather than imposed. The burden of his past actions remained heavy, but now there was a path forward, a way to make amends that did not require forgetting or denying what had been done. And in the worlds he had once erased, life began to return. Civilizations long thought lost emerged once more into existence, greeted by Colossus beings who came not as destroyers, but as restorers. The cycle of extinction that had defined the cosmos for millions of years gave way to a new cycle of renewal. In time, the fragmented entity that had been the Council reformed, not as a singular controlling consciousness, but as a diverse collective of void aspects, each with their own perspective and purpose. Some still believed in the necessity of intervention and control, but they were balanced by others who advocated for cooperation and growth. Arian took his place among them, not as a servant, but as an equal voice, one who had witnessed both the worst and the best that void power could achieve. With Lyra and others like her, he formed a bridge between the void entities and the living civilizations they had once sought to control, ensuring that never again would extinction be seen as the easiest solution. And throughout the Aetheris galaxy, a new understanding spread, that the void was not merely emptiness or death, but potential waiting to be shaped. That destruction and creation were part of the same cycle, that what had been lost could be found again. That forgiveness, freely given and earnestly received, could heal wounds even across the vast distances of space and time. In the restored research station on Tanith, Lyra eventually erected a simple monument, not to commemorate destruction, but to celebrate restoration. The inscription, written in the ancient language Morven had taught them, translated to a single phrase. What was erased is remembered. What is remembered can be restored. What is restored must be cherished. Arian Vale, the void-walking Colossus, who had once erased civilizations without question, now dedicated his existence to these words, finding in them not absolution for past sins, but direction for future atonement. And in that purpose, perhaps, a measure of peace.